Super honored to be here this afternoon and to be speaking in front of this audience especially. I'll thank you all really in advance for the advocacy, for the teamwork, for pushing us really as a region to work as hard as we are, to be sustainable, to be conscious, to be thoughtful about what we are doing as agencies. I'm fortunate, like Lori mentioned, to be working in Washington, D.C. For a mayor who takes this work very seriously. Also fortunate to be working with colleagues like Tommy Wells, who you'll be hearing from, director of our D.C. Department of Energy and the Environment, Greer Gillis, who is director of our D.C. Department of General Services, and really all the other colleagues that play a role in making us the city we are and advancing in the way that we do sustainability goals. I also want to just acknowledge Annie White. Annie, if you'll wave and sort of, yep, she is the manager of our DPW Office of Waste Diversion, and really just the backbone of some of the work that we've been doing at DC DPW. Many of you know, especially, and I see some faces that I certainly recognize from DC. Many of you know that we have a very aggressive goal in Washington, DC to divert 80% of our waste. And so in order to do that, we have to move very quickly as partners and as a city. And we are certainly doing that. And so I want to talk a bit today about just that. With respect to plastics, this mic is kind of short and I'm a little tall, so I'm going to try to work with it and not look down too much. With respect to plastics, there are several key strategies that are currently underway. First, we recently expanded the list of recyclable items in Washington, D.C. To include a number of plastic foodware items like cups and plates and clamshells, to-go containers. We did this by surveying local recycling facilities. Thank you, thanks, I appreciate that. Thank you very much. Much better, I get to look up now. Perfect. And so we did that by surveying a number of our recycling facilities really in the region. And so what that means for us is that we went to them, understood better what they currently collect, and then we worked really hard in the city to make sure that we were expanding the list to include every recyclable item we could. That has made such a big difference. We've also worked really hard to harmonize, and I'll say last year that thanks to the mayor's leadership, we harmonized the recyclable list citywide. And that may sound simple, but it's a big deal. So no matter where you are in Washington, D.C., whether you're at home, at work, eating at a restaurant, you're recycling the same thing. And so some of the clarity, and I heard it a little bit when I walked in a bit earlier on the panel, some of the confusion that we've heard in years past around what you can and cannot recycle in Washington, D.C., we are on the path of clarifying. It doesn't happen overnight, and I think Andy mentioned the need for public education, and we're certainly on that path now that we have a list of recyclables that are harmonized. And I'll say that this process that we went through with our Office of Waste Diversion and many of our community stakeholders will not be a one-time thing. And so we will continue on a regular basis to survey our recycling facilities in the region and then make changes as we need to the recycling list. Very important component of the work in the future. In terms of the success of policy changes like this, you know that it requires behavior changes for our residents in Washington, D.C. And to this end, the Department of Public Works embarked on a pretty significant, wide-ranging public education campaign to inform residents about the new items on the list. This included mailing to households that we service in Washington, D.C., advertisements on the metro system, on buses, several newspapers, local newspapers, and extensive outreach in training to businesses, universities, and other institutions in Washington, D.C., including apartment complexes that we don't necessarily service, but certainly need to still be educated about what we're doing and what can now be recycled in the city. Knowing that residents are always going to have questions, and they always do, about what they should and should not be recycling or putting in their recycle bins. We also created a website. Many of you know this site, especially those in Washington, D.C., zerowaste.dc.gov. Please do visit the website. There's a very interactive tool on that site where you can basically put any item you can think of in the search component, and it'll tell you how to dispose of it in Washington, D.C. And so we have gotten, at this point, 2,806 materials have been searched on the website just in September, so just last month. And so among the frequently asked items or searched items on the website, plastic bags, plastic takeout containers, plastic wrap, and bubble wrap. And so please do visit the website. It's a very interactive tool, and one that we hope will provide some education and demystify, if you will, the process of recycling in Washington, D.C. Another one of our top priorities in D.C. At Public Works is reducing the district's recycling contamination rate, by which I mean helping our residents keep items that cannot be recycled out of their recycling bins. Plastic bags and film, which clog up machinery in the recycling facilities, also create hazards for our employees, and the employees at the facilities are by far the biggest contaminant we've seen. Contamination is a problem because it drives up the cost of recycling for our city. We pay a per ton fee to have the materials collected and sorted and processed. When they receive, we then receive a rebate on how much, based on how much material is truly recyclable and thus able to be sold to manufacturers. The higher the rebate the city services or receives, the more cost-effective recycling is for our city. Currently, our contamination level in Washington, D.C., in terms of residential recycling stream is between 16 and 20%. And we'd like to get that number down to 12%. And that means we have some work to do. I believe, and certainly the team at DC Public Works believes, that this is certainly doable. And that is part of what we are working towards with our partners. As the nation's capital, men and women at Public Works take great pride in ensuring that our city always looks its best. As part of our mission, DPW services 4,800 litter bins. So we've talked a bit this morning since I've been here about our public streets and the litter that makes its way through into our storm drains. And so we at DC DPW are responsible for the collection of those 4,800 litter bins. That is an extremely important piece of sort of the litter component in cleaning Washington, D.C. We are also responsible for the street sweeping program. This is where mechanical sweepers traverse our city. That is, again, a very important component of making sure that that loose litter doesn't make it into our storm drains and thus does not make it into our waterways. And finally, to wrap up, I will mention I do have a stat here. Last year, our street sweeping crews removed 4,361 tons of litter from our streets. Big number, especially when you compare, so a car is 3 tons. right? And so 4,361 tons of litter from our streets, a very big deal for us and something I'm certainly proud of. And finally, I want to wrap up my remarks by asking, one thing from you. And I want to take advantage of the fact that I'm standing in front of you and that I'm here in front of this audience in particular, and ask for your help. As part of our efforts to grow our waste diversion rate, we are quickly moving towards building a large-scale composting facility in the district. I appreciate that, Lori. I appreciate that. It's a huge leap forward for Washington, D.C. Right now, if you live in D.C. And you are a household that is serviced by DPW, you have two bins, a waste bin and a recycling bin. And so what we're talking about is adding a third bin in Washington, D.C. for food and yard waste. This will potentially give us the ability to capture 141,000 tons of food and yard waste and keep it away from the landfills and away from waste to energy facilities. Again, something that we will need to do a lot of work to create and make a reality, but certainly we are on the path. And I'm, again, very proud to be a part of that change and certainly a part of that journey. That said, we need your help to demystify what composting is. This is the audience to do it. And so there's a lot of misconception about, rodents and odor associated with compost. And this is the group to help your friends and your neighbors, especially those who live in Washington, D.C., understand the value in composting, understand how simple composting can be, because that's certainly what we'll be doing from D.C. DPW's perspective as we move forward. I'll also say that I heard about enforcement. We're doing a number of things around enforcement. We have an entire division within Public Works that helps with enforcement. One of those things is helping our residents understand the importance of recycling the right items. And so we've created this OOPS tag that we'll be handing out for those. Yeah, pretty cool. And this helps make sure residents understand what they should and should not be recycling. We're going to arm our trash and recycling crews, right, with this and help in terms of educating our residents around what should and should not be recycled. So that said, I want to close because I know I only had 10 minutes, and I really want to thank the team at DPW. Thank you all for the work you do. I'm certainly excited to be a part of this effort. We're going to get the district clean, and we're going to make it green.